Okay, so I'm sure a lot of you are dying to listen to this video and hear my saga, my story of why I left my position as a PA in just 1 year, and not any position. This was my first position as a PA. So I just want to start this video by saying, some of you already know this, but for those of you, this is your first video that you're watching. I made the transition from dietitian to physician assistant. Even though I still maintain my RD credential, I went back to school and then just finished my first year of being a PA. And I will say my first year has been a rough one, and honestly, it has been very polar opposite to what I expected a PA would be. I definitely don't have any regrets in going to PA school and becoming a PA, so don't get me wrong there. But my experiences this year have been just nothing short of kind of chaotic and stressful, and pretty bad, for lack of a better word. Not going to be all negative. Obviously, this video focuses most on the negative. There were a lot of positive things that happened this year, a lot of personal growth, a lot of learning, obviously. I started out in a specialty area, so I'm very impressed with how much, myself and really anyone in my shoes can learn in a short amount of time. So, but for the sake of this video, because you want to know, I am going to focus on the negative. So, I will just dive in and say that in my first year as a PA, I worked 2 jobs. I had my primary role, which was a brand new role that my department had rolled out or opened up, I guess. I will say I wasn't the only PA in my department, so the department as a whole was used to working with PAs, but I was the first one to fill what I later found out for a long period of time, the first one to fill this role. And this role was a hybrid job between the hospital and clinic every single day, 5 days a week, which in and of itself, I probably should have seen as a red flag, and I should have run for the hills there, because in a perfect world, that sounds great to work in the hospital and then run a continuity clinic where you see the patients you discharge and then see them outpatient. But I didn't get any admin time in my job, or rather they argued that the admin time was built in. And as anybody who works in a hospital knows, you never know what your day is going to look like, and some days are super busy and it kind of just happens at any point in the day. Nothing is cut and dry, right? So yes, you do get that flexibility of your time somewhat more than clinic, but it doesn't mean you're just sitting there twiddling your thumbs. So that was kind of crazy. So I worked that job, which was full-time, a 1.0 FTE. And when I first came in, I didn't have a badge on day one. I didn't know where to park. I had zero communication leading up to my position from my manager. And then I later found out that I didn't have Epic access for 3 months, I want to say, which made my onboarding super hard. So that brings me to onboarding. My position had, when I interviewed for it, they'd said, oh yes, we'll train you XYZ. But when I got to the position, there honestly wasn't really a set onboarding schedule, and I didn't really have any sort of training until I sort of had to ask for it, which also, red flag. A funny aside too, one of the physicians, I don't think I was supposed to know this, but had told me, oh my gosh, don't leave us like the person before you left after 5 days, which I don't know if that's true or not, but I was, all of this chaos kind of happening, and then I hear that, it's like, wow, those were not the words that I was wanting to hear on my first week. So time goes by, I advocate for myself from the beginning. I finally get some sort of pseudo onboarding, a lot of shadowing and onboarding schedule, I guess, in place. And then, I start to hopefully find my groove. Now, this was an academic medical center, and I guess one thing that I anticipated more with the academic medical center is that physicians would be used to working with PAs and advanced practice providers, PA, NP, whatever. And I later found out that that just wasn't really the case with my supervising physicians, and they themselves were getting to know the role. And so that kind of made for awkward relationships and sort of an awkward dynamic in practice. And I found myself really having to constantly advocate for myself, not only let them know like what this role was, because apparently it was never really defined to them, like, okay, we're gonna have a PA come in for the first time and do this hybrid role. Like, nobody in my department seemed to get that. And I found myself having to explain like why I was even there over and over and over again, which was kind of exhausting amidst having to learn a lot of content in a short amount of time and get to this level of proficiency where I felt comfortable. And honestly, that was safe. Obviously, I never did anything that was unsafe because I'm someone who knows what lane to stay in, and I would never do something without being absolutely 100% confident in it. But yeah, it was a lot going on. Not to mention, I didn't have just like one supervising physician. I actually had 15 of them. So working in the specialty I did, that was actually proved to be really tough. It proved to be really tough because for those practicing PAs and Ps out there, you realize sometimes medicine is not black and white. Actually, most of the time it isn't. And everybody practices slightly different. And I'm not going to share details. For those of you who know me personally, you know what area I worked in, but this is a specialty where the details really, really come into play, and everybody practices this type of medicine very differently. And I felt very micromanaged throughout, obviously the beginning, and the supervising physicians would correct me down to like the minutia of what I was doing. And I voiced my concerns from the beginning, but I just really never felt like I was being listened to, I guess, or if they did listen to me in the moment, nothing really was solved. No problems were solved. And so I found myself really kind of gaslighting myself, for lack of a better word. And I would always tell myself like, okay, Caroline, it's going to get better. You're a new grad. This is just a new grad problem. Like, this is you learning, like everybody warned you and said, there's going to be a really steep learning curve. It takes a long time before you feel comfortable. And yeah, I fully acknowledge that. Like, that is a valid statement. However, 6 months go by, a year goes by, and I'm feeling more and more confident in the medicine aspect and the day-to-day decision making, but yet I didn't really feel like any of the peripheral stuff that actually makes a big difference to your quality of life in a job. None of that was really changing. So I thought, is this a me problem, or is this a departmental kind of more systemic problem going on? So I kind of made the decision, knowing that I was feeling this way. I made the decision, I want to say maybe 2 or 3 months in, to take on a secondary role. Because I was working in a specialty area, and so I took on sort of like a moonlighting position in urgent care. It was still within the exact same academic institution that I was working at for my primary role. The hospital had several urgent care locations, and I thought, what, this is great. I'm an internal employee and an applicant. The process to applying was pretty straightforward. I ended up having 3 interviews, but I got the job, luckily, and I loved it. I loved that role. I felt like it was an avenue for me to really keep my clinical skills from getting rusty, and I got to do procedures, which I liked a lot, and I just got to do a lot of more family med style stuff. That was great, and because I really didn't know that from the beginning that I was going to stay in this position, and so I thought, I've got to make a strategic move. It's gonna suck that I'm working more than full time, right? I ended up working, I want to say like I think there was a minimum of 8 hours per month that I had to fulfill. The shift was 5 hours, so I ended up working 10 hours a month, which honestly was nothing. And I would pick up shifts here and there if I was needing extra money or something for like a trip or something like that, or Christmas presents. But it was a minimal time commitment. It's still made for, less relaxing weekends. But I do feel like that was a strategy that I used that helped me out a lot. But so here it goes, back to the tea. So 6 months, a year goes by, more like 10, probably the 10 or 11 month mark. And I still am feeling this way, still like dreading coming into work. My poor significant other has to hear, watch me cry at home and hear about the stress and kind of the feeling of just not feeling valued in my role, or feeling like, what am I even doing here? Like, what value am I even providing? Half the people don't even get why I'm doing things. I was also very much kept inside a box in my job. So I was only allowed to do like one aspect of my specialty, whereas the other PAs did everything. So that was also kind of frustrating. In a way, I was glad to start out with one thing, and I think they were trying to do it like as a courtesy to me, so I didn't feel overwhelmed. But after a while, it did sort of start to get frustrating. And then you know how things go when you have a job, like people start to see you're confident and competent in your job, and so then they start asking you to take on more where you never really got the training for that more in the first place. So that kind of started to creep in, and I started feeling uncomfortable again even more, and I found myself having to kind of put my foot down or say, let's like put a pin on that idea for a while, because I'm still sort of figuring some things out. Even with my schedule, like I worked in a certain clinic. I was working in a MFM clinic 1 day a week, and then to cover a maternity leave, and then somebody came back, and then they were gonna pull me where they really needed me. Just lots of things going on. And so back to the like story at hand, we're at the maybe 11-month mark, and I am in an environment where I'm presenting to my attending physician in the hospital, and we would work with a bunch of residents. And that physician that week said something very, very uncalled for that was very personal to me. He kept like asking why I was out sick, and little did he know that I manage a chronic disease. And he kept like pressing it in front of everyone why I was sick and why I was gone. And at the time I didn't think anything of it. But later that week, he basically berated me again in front of the entire group of residents. And it just made me stop and think, more so because of the event that happened that Monday. The second event happened on Friday, and I won't get into details, but what he said to me made one of the female residents like drop her jaw, and you could, the tension and anxiety and awkwardness in the room, you could literally cut with a knife. It was that palpable, that I just said, you know what? I'm done. I'm done. I actually had to file an HR report because of other things that had happened. And it just really made me realize, like, I no longer feel comfortable in this work environment at all. And I'm not even saying half of what was said to me behind closed doors that I heard through rumor, that was said to my face, just the interactions. It was tough, very, very tough to deal with as a new grad. And I'm making this video because I think it's important for people to be transparent about things like this. I had posted something on my social media channels at the Clinic Dietitian, in case you want to follow me there, shameless plug. I had made a post about this in a nutshell, and the amount of responses that I got from all of you saying, wow, I'm in a very similar position, or you gave me the confidence to stand up for myself, or maybe reconsider my options. It was pretty overwhelming. And so for that reason, I decided to share my story and then make a video in long form content here for you. But the funny thing is, so I, at that point, was done. And it is very much not in my character not to give notice for a job, for leaving. But I was so uncomfortable at that point after those events had occurred that we were coming up to Thanksgiving break, and I thought, you know what? I am just going to quietly exit, because at this point, I don't even really feel like I'm contributing that much. I didn't have a patient's clinic schedule where I would screw over my patients, just leaving. So luckily I was in a position where I felt okay. It still felt a little icky of me to leave like so suddenly and abruptly, but I felt like it was a message that needed to be sent. And so I did that because I was in an at-will position. I could have left, they could have fired me at any point. Some PAs are not so lucky. Some PAs contractually have to give a certain amount of notice. I was not in a position like that. So I just left, and then I basically gave a letter, obviously gave my notice through email, which again, normally if I've left positions in the past, I would speak face to face, but I just didn't feel comfortable even in my relationships with management either. So I sent an email and I said, you know, if you're interested in knowing, like, this is actually some of the rationale for why I'm leaving. And I attached a letter, and I sort of pointed out some issues and I didn't feel like I was complaining necessarily. I felt like I was being somewhat constructive and saying issues with the role. And it wasn't until, I want to say, maybe like a couple hours after I gave my leave of notice, notice of leave, excuse me. It wasn't until a couple hours later that my manager sent out a blast email to the entire department. For some reason, I was still included on said email, so I got it. An email notifying the entire department that I had left and that I was not coming back, and that they would be posting the job later that day for my replacement. And I just sat back and just kind of had a good chuckle at that point, because not only did they not take anything into consideration that I shared, which in hindsight, you know what, I probably shouldn't have even given the letter or the constructive criticism about the role, but nor did they take any of that into consideration. But like, the fact that I am so replaceable, and I know I'm not special, but it really hit home. And it was a first time experience for me to truly realize in real time how replaceable every single one of us are in healthcare, any job probably, but it was just a good reminder. So if you're still hanging on and watching with me here, this is your reminder to really take a personal invoice of how you're feeling. Do you feel like you are in a position where you're still growing in your role? Do you feel like you're giving value? Do you feel like it's a good environment for you? On the flip side, if you are thinking about your job negatively more than 50% of the time, obviously the grass is always going to be greener and there's nothing ever perfect. But if you are negatively thinking about your job and it is consuming your every thought after work, and you're bringing it home and you're burdening your spouses and your loved ones with this, then I'm going to hold your hand when I say this, but you know, it is probably time to leave. And I think this is something that we need to talk about more, and nothing is going to change in the healthcare system if we don't speak up and share experiences openly like this. Because granted, I'm a millennial, maybe I'm the bratty millennial who thinks, oh, you should love your work and have work-life balance. Well, you know what? Yeah, I do. I do think that life is way too short. COVID taught us all of that. I worked full-time during COVID. We need to at least have, make work be enjoyable. And if you're not sleeping at night because of your job, then it's just not worth it. So that was again, I want to say that my secondary role and my secondary role boss and manager was awesome. They were so understanding and so helpful throughout the process. And when I said, I'm having to leave kind of abruptly because of this, they got it. And I had already found another job well in advance of leaving, actually, my position, which I'll make another video about that. I'm going to start that soon. But yeah, hopefully this video can be helpful. I very much felt like I was in a dark place during my first year of practice, because I had my friends who were in my PA class cohort who I would share with, but a lot of times I felt like I was complaining because they had a totally different experience. They had really positive relationships with their SPs and their managers. So I didn't want to be a Debbie Downer, and so I felt like I was very alone in this process. And I don't want people to feel alone if they're feeling this way, whether you're a new grad or if you're a seasoned veteran PA who has 10 plus years under your belt. I think this can happen at any time. Something I also realized about PA jobs is you kind of really never know what the job is going to be like until you actually get in the thick of it. Yeah, you can do shadow shifts and interviewing and all of that and ask good questions, but you really never really know, because I feel like it's comparing apples to oranges, each PA job. So that's another story. But hopefully this video was helpful to some of you watching, and let me know if you have any questions or comments. I'd love to know if you experienced something similar, just for the validation, if anything else, because it's nice to hear other people having similar experiences. I think my experience is probably not unique. I'm sure there's thousands of people out there who have a similar storyline. So please share, and if you're liking more of these PA specific content type videos, just let me know, because I'd be happy to make more of these and to help you all out as wherever you're at in your PA journey. So thanks for watching.